welcome back to Meaning Making. Now today we're going to be talking about how can we build healthy boundaries. What does that mean? What does that look like? So I'm going to tell you a story, and this story comes from the book Changes That Heal from Dr. Henry Cloud. And it just absolutely changed my life. So story number 1 goes like this. You have your own house and your own yard with your lawn and your children and your dogs and your cats and your whatever else you have in there. And this represents your life. This is a metaphor for your life. Your neighbor has his own yard with a gate and his own lawn and his children and his whatever else. So now the neighbor's lawnmower breaks and his lawn is just out of control, and suddenly we have a rat problem, and it looks terrible, and the whole neighborhood looks terrible, and people coming to look for houses to buy just look at that house and think, I don't want that for a neighbor, and they just pass by, and it becomes a problem for the whole neighborhood kind of. It has an effect on other people, right? Now, being the good person that you are, you want to help. You want to see what you can do to help your neighbor. So now, the first question I want you to ask yourself is, would your neighbor help you in this situation? If you were in the exact same situation, would your neighbor have said, hey neighbor, how can I help you? Because if not, why are you helping them? It becomes a problem. There's nothing wrong with helping people. I'm not saying don't help people. I'm just saying that people tend to take advantage of you very quickly and easily if you take their problems on. And if they are not willing in a relationship to give what you're willing to give, the same amount of love, energy, support, if they're not matching you at least, then you need to understand they're never going to match you. You're always going to end up disappointed that they are not investing in this relationship what you are willing to invest in it. And when that becomes a habit, you become really unhappy in this relationship, and they actually just don't care. If they cared, they would have invested. So in that sense, I would say don't build a too strong relationship with too many expectations from a person who wouldn't have done the same for you. If you still want to help them, that's fine. But understand that they're not going to do the same for you, and accept that then. So now the neighbor's lawnmower is broken, the grass is all over the place, and you now have 2 options at your disposal. You can either say, neighbor, I can see your lawnmower is broken. Let me come to your place every Saturday. My lawnmower is just fine, so after I've mowed my lawn on Saturday, I'll just come over and mow your lawn as well. Now, what does this teach your neighbor? It teaches your neighbor to become dependent on you, and that is very unhealthy. It teaches your neighbor that they don't have to take responsibility for their own problems. You will do that on their behalf. Now remember, your yard is your responsibility. You take responsibility for your house and your lawn and your children and making sure you have food on your table and that kind of thing. That's your responsibility. Your neighbor's responsibility is doing all of that on his side of the fence, right? So taking the responsibility out of his hands becomes a toxic thing where they are just enabled to do nothing with their lives and not to solve their own problems and learn the skills to solve their own problems. And they don't grow. If you keep enabling someone like this, they just don't mature, they don't grow up. So you're gonna end up parenting them for a long time. And in relationships, this often happens, that you kind of have a child-parent relationship between a husband and wife, which doesn't work, and it's unhealthy, and it ends up badly. So instead of saying, hey neighbor, let me do it for you, let me take the problem out of your hands, let me take responsibility for your problem and your situation. A better solution would be to say, neighbor, I can see your lawnmower is broken, and I know you don't have money to fix it right now or to buy a new one. So for the next 3 months, I will lend you my lawnmower on a Saturday for 2 hours, and that will give you time to save up. That's still helping. You're still helping this person, but you're enabling them to make a plan for themselves and take responsibility for their own lives and their own problems and fix their own problem. That's a much, much healthier way of fixing the problem. Now the next scenario is the more abusive kind of scenario, where your neighbor comes into your yard where you are responsible. This is your life and your yard, your children, your house. And your neighbor comes into your yard and he kicks your dog. So obviously you're not going to stand around and just watch him do that. So now you communicate to your neighbor. Neighbor, I really don't approve of this. Please don't kick my dog again. Your neighbor says, oh, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. But lo and behold, next week he's back and he does the same thing. Now remember, in your life and in your yard where you are responsible, you call the shots. You make the rules. So now you can either just kind of let it go and accept that this person is going to be abusive and continue being abusive, regardless of the fact that he knows you don't approve of it. Or you can handle this as, okay, I set a boundary and now he's testing it, so now I need to stick to it. So once you stick to it, they learn that you are really serious and not going to allow it. So now you can say, neighbor, remember, you're in charge, you are responsible in your yard, right? This is your life, you make the choices for yourself. So now instead of saying, neighbor, oh, I don't like it, please don't do it again, and you keep saying that for 9, 10, 20 times until your dog is dead. Instead of doing that, you say, neighbor, I've asked you to not do that, yet you did it again. So I'm going to put you outside the gate of my yard until this behavior has stopped. Now, the problem that people have with that is they feel like they're rejecting someone. And nobody likes doing that. Nobody likes rejecting another person. But this is not rejecting a person, this is different. You are not rejecting a person, you are saying no to abusive behavior. You have a problem with the behavior, not the person. So the person is welcome in my yard as long as the behavior stays outside the gate. And in this sense, boundaries, setting a boundary and communicating your boundary always has to be paired with action. Otherwise it's not going to work. In other words, you set your boundary verbally, and trust me, they are going to test it. Even the best of people test it to see how far they can push it. It's just human behavior. They are going they're definitely going to test it. So as soon as they test it, then you need to put action to it. So my advice would be, in that initial conversation where you communicate your boundary, also communicate what would happen and what would be the consequences if you do not comply by these rules. So the first time my neighbor kicks my dog, I'm going to tell him, neighbor, I really don't approve of this. You cannot kick my dog in my own yard. And if you do it again, I'm going to put you outside my yard until this behavior changes. So there's a definite consequence. He knows what the consequences will be if he does it again. And when he comes back and he tests that boundary, then is the time to put action behind your words. Because if you don't, he's just going to walk all over you and keep kicking your dog. So very important, communicate the boundary, communicate what would happen, the consequences if he doesn't comply by the boundary, and put it into action and stick to it. Now, in the beginning, when we start doing this with people, and we didn't used to do this with people. We never used to say no to things, and now suddenly we've learned about healthy boundaries, and we're trying it out, and we're communicating our boundaries to people, and now suddenly we figure out people are not used to hearing no from us, and suddenly everyone is angry at me. It's bound to happen. People get angry when they hear no from you for the first time. If they're not used to hearing that from you and suddenly you just say no, those who are a bit unhealthy are not going to like it. And the ones who get angry are especially the ones who need that boundary from you, who need a healthy boundary from you. So I wouldn't say start setting boundaries with everyone in your life all at once and make them really rigid. Don't do that. Start with one person and practice to figure out where that balance is for a healthy boundary for you, and where your values are at, and where your relationship with this person is at. Because you don't want everyone to be angry at you at the same time, and you're just at home alone and crying about boundaries. Don't do that to yourself. So set healthy boundaries and be firm, and don't set a boundary if you're not willing to put the action into it, because people are going to test it, and once they test it and see you don't do anything about it, and you don't stick to what you said you were going to do, you don't stick to that consequences, then they know they have control over you. So it's very, very important. Read the room, get to know people, understand that abusive people, toxic people needs a more rigid boundary, and that's healthy and that's good. And sometimes even porous people need a healthy boundary and to stay out of your face a little bit, because they often tend to be a bit too much or just share too much and maybe make everything about themselves or whatever. So you know where your values are at, you know what you like and don't like. You set the boundaries for your life. You are responsible. Givers have to set boundaries because takers won't.